Something strange is happening behind the scenes with the Denver Broncos, and we really need to talk about Courtland Sutton. This is one of the most important players on this offense, and man, the Broncos cannot afford unnecessary problems with the season getting closer. I really want to see Denver in the Super Bowl, and why not this year? But Sutton has now gone 3 straight days without his normal practice workload, and his unusual press conference has only created more questions. Some people believe the Broncos are simply protecting their veteran receiver, while others are wondering if something bigger involving his contract could be happening behind the scenes. I want to know which side you're on. Do you think there's something we should actually be worried about with Courtland Sutton, or do you believe Sean Payton and the Broncos simply have everything under control? Write your opinion in the comments. And if you've been a Denver Broncos fan for more than 15 years, smash that like button as hard as you can. Go Broncos! Let's go to the Super Bowl. Alright, let's talk about Courtland Sutton. Alright, Broncos country, let's get straight into this because the Courtland Sutton situation has become impossible to ignore. It started with what appeared to be a normal veteran rest day. Sutton is an established player, training camp is demanding, and giving an experienced veteran some additional recovery time isn't exactly something that should create panic. Nobody needed to make a big deal about one day. Then came a second consecutive rest day. That was unusual, but there was still a reasonable explanation. The Broncos were going through their most physical practice of training camp, using almost all of the time available under the collective bargaining agreement. In that situation, protecting a veteran from unnecessary wear and tear can make sense. But then came day 3. And that's when this story became really strange. According to the information coming from camp, even longtime observers of the Broncos were surprised by what was happening. Jeff Legwold, who has covered the team for decades, pointed out how unusual it was to see a veteran receive consecutive rest days like this. The possibility that Sutton might be dealing with some kind of physical issue naturally started entering the conversation. Then the Broncos returned for an unpadded practice following that extremely physical session. Sutton appeared on the field. For a moment, everything seemed normal again. He was there, the team wasn't wearing pads, and it looked like perhaps those questions could finally disappear. Except they didn't. Sutton eventually moved away from the main practice area and began working on a side field. That immediately caught everyone's attention because the side area is also where players working their way through physical issues have been seen doing rehabilitation work. Nick Benito was there. Luke Wattenberg was there. And now Sutton was there too. Naturally, that created speculation. But what happened afterward may have made this situation even more confusing. Sutton spoke to reporters, and when he was asked whether he was healthy, his response was essentially that he absolutely was. If Sutton says he's healthy, that makes the idea of a significant injury harder to understand. But his press conference contained another moment that immediately stood out. Sutton repeatedly talked about trying to be a good soldier. Think about that wording for a moment. He wasn't simply talking about getting some rest or preparing for the season. He talked about being a good soldier and following what was being asked of him. At another point, Sutton indicated that this applied whether what he was being asked to do was something he wanted to do or not. That's where this situation becomes extremely interesting. Because if Sutton is healthy, why has he gone through 3 consecutive days without his normal workload? If these are simply veteran rest days, why would Denver continue doing it during an unpadded practice where the physical demands are considerably lower? And if this were connected to a possible trade, why would the Broncos put Sutton in front of reporters while speculation was already growing around him? None of those explanations fit perfectly. That's why another possibility has entered the discussion. Perhaps something is happening with Sutton's contract. I want to make something extremely clear here. There has been no confirmation in the information we have that Denver is negotiating a specific contract move with Sutton. We don't know that. We shouldn't pretend we do. But as a theory, it would help explain some of the unusual circumstances. If a team is working through a financial or contractual situation with an important player, protecting that player physically while conversations happen would make sense. You don't necessarily need to remove him completely from the facility. You don't need to hide him from everyone. But you might limit what he does because the last thing anyone wants is an injury complicating whatever discussions may be happening. There has also been outside speculation that Pat Bryant's strong training camp could potentially make Sutton more expendable. Again, that's speculation. The argument is that Denver has liked what it has seen from Bryant, and perhaps that changes the way the organization views the receiving room. But there is also a very reasonable argument against the trade theory. If the Broncos were actively trying to move Sutton, allowing him to address reporters in the middle of this strange situation would be an unusual decision. So right now, Broncos country, we have questions without a confirmed answer. And Sutton's own comments aren't making those questions disappear. Personally, I think that's what makes this story so fascinating. Sutton is one of the most recognizable veterans on this roster. When something involving him suddenly breaks from the normal routine for 3 consecutive days, people are going to notice. For now, we have to watch what happens next. Does Sutton return to a full practice? Does Sean Payton provide another explanation? Does something happen involving his contract? Or does this entire situation eventually turn out to be nothing more than Denver being extremely careful with an important veteran? Those answers will eventually come. But while Sutton's situation is creating uncertainty, there is much more encouraging news coming from Broncos training camp. Let's start with Jalen Waddle. Waddle was seen at practice, which is an encouraging development by itself. He wasn't completely separated from everything and hidden away in the training room. He was present around the team. However, there was still something noticeable. Waddle appeared to be walking with a limp, and there seemed to be some type of sleeve around his left knee. Obviously, nobody wants to see that from a player expected to play an important role in this offense. But Sean Payton offered something he doesn't always give reporters when discussing injuries: a timetable. According to Payton, Waddle is dealing with a strain and could be back in approximately 4 or 5 days. That is significant. Payton is usually careful when talking publicly about injuries, so the fact that he provided an estimated return creates some reason for optimism. We still have to see Waddle return to the field before completely forgetting about it, but based on what was said, there appears to be confidence that this isn't something expected to keep him out for an extended period. And the encouraging injury news doesn't stop there. Nick Bonitto was also seen on the field with a helmet. That's another positive development after Payton had previously expressed confidence regarding the situations involving Bonitto, Wattenberg, and Waddle. Luke Wattenberg was also present working through his situation. When you compare that to serious injuries where players sometimes cannot even participate around practice, seeing these guys on the field in some capacity is certainly better than the alternative. Training camp is always a nervous period for fans because every time somebody leaves practice or misses a session, people immediately fear the worst. That's understandable. The Broncos are preparing for a season with significant expectations, and nobody wants to see important players unavailable before meaningful football even begins. But so far, the updates surrounding these players provide reasons to remain encouraged. And then we need to talk about Bo Nix. This might quietly be one of the best pieces of news from the entire practice. The defense had reportedly controlled the previous couple of days, but this time the offense responded. And it responded in a big way. There were multiple periods with Bo Nix leading the first-team offense where the football reportedly didn't hit the ground. Think about what that means. We're talking about efficiency, rhythm, accuracy, and an offense successfully moving the football after the defense